In this video, he thought she was at yoga, but when the police knocked on his door and asked if he knew where his wife was last night, his whole world shattered. Chapter 1. A knock at the door. It was a quiet Saturday morning when everything James thought he knew about his life began to crack. He had just finished making his coffee, standing barefoot in the kitchen of their modern suburban home, when he heard a knock at the door. Not the usual neighborly knock, but 3 firm, heavy hits that made his chest tighten. He glanced at the clock. 8:42 a.m. Laura had left the night before, saying she was going to an extended yoga and wellness retreat with her best friend, Melanie. James hadn't questioned it. Laura always talked about how burned out she felt. She deserved a break. He opened the door to find 2 police officers standing there, rain still dripping from the brim of one of their hats. "Mr. Bennett?" The taller one asked. "Yes?" James replied, feeling his stomach twist. "Is your wife, Laura Bennett, home?" James blinked. "No, she's out of town. Why?" The officer exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking again. "Are you sure?" James frowned. "She left last night. Some yoga retreat a few hours north." There was a pause. "We need to ask you a few questions," the officer said. "May we come in?" James stepped aside, heart pounding. 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind. Was Laura hurt? Was there an accident? Did something happen to Melanie? They sat in the living room. The younger officer pulled out a small notebook. "Mr. Bennett, your wife's car was spotted last night outside a motel in Greystone." James blinked, confused. Greystone? That's not even near where she said she'd be. She checked in under a different name. There was a disturbance. A disturbance. James' voice cracked slightly. "Did someone get hurt?" "No one's pressing charges," the officer replied slowly. But someone called in a complaint, loud voices, crashing sounds. The words hung in the air like fog. James tried to process them, but they made no sense. "Are you sure it was her?" "She left before we arrived," the officer said. "But we recovered surveillance footage. It's grainy, but your wife was seen exiting the room in a hurry, alone." James suddenly felt cold, colder than he had ever felt. His wife hadn't been at a yoga retreat. She had lied. But why? Who was she meeting? "We'd like to know if she mentioned anyone suspicious recently." "Anything out of the ordinary," the officer said. James shook his head slowly. She's been distant lately, stressed." "But no, nothing like this." The officers stood. "If she returns, please contact us. And Mr. Bennett." He looked up. "Be careful." They left him standing alone in the living room, holding his untouched coffee, now cold. His hands trembled. He stared at the closed door, but his mind was wide open to questions he never thought he'd be asking. Why had she lied? Why was she in a motel under a fake name? And why did the police say, "Be careful, dash"? He stood frozen for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on him like a storm waiting to explode. Then, slowly, he walked upstairs to their bedroom. Her suitcase was gone. Her yoga mat was neatly rolled up in the corner. But something was off. Her favorite necklace, the one she always wore, still hung on its hook. James stared at it like it was a missing piece of a puzzle he never knew he was solving. And just then, something clicked. She wanted him to think she was far away, but she had stayed close enough to run, close enough to lie. And whatever happened at that motel, it was only the beginning. Don't miss what happens next. Things spiral fast in the upcoming chapter, and James will discover something in their own home that makes everything even darker. Coming up next, what's hidden in her drawer reveals a truth he's not ready to face. Next chapter, what he finds in her drawer changes everything. Chapter 2, what he finds in her drawer changes everything. James sat at the edge of the bed, still gripping the coffee cup like it could anchor him to the moment. His eyes were locked on the necklace, the one Laura never took off, the one he had given her for their 5th anniversary. A delicate silver locket with a tiny engraving inside. "Always us. She never left it behind." James stood, walked to the dresser, and picked it up with 2 fingers. It was ice cold. His thumb brushed over the clasp, and with a click, it opened. Inside was a new photo, one he didn't recognize. Laura, smiling wide, with someone's arm around her shoulders. Cropped, just enough to hide the face, But what stopped James cold wasn't the mystery man's identity. It was the backdrop behind them, a wall mural of a phoenix rising from flames. James had seen it before. 2 years ago, they'd gone to a friend's engagement party at a hotel downtown, the Phoenix Grand. He remembered how Laura had said the place was gaudy, said she'd never step foot in it again. But here she was, smiling in that same lobby, with someone else. He placed the necklace down, his hands shaking. He didn't want to believe it yet, didn't want to. So he moved to her side of the dresser. She had a drawer he never touched, filled with her journals, her old birthday cards, the little pieces of her inner world. Until now, he opened it. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then, beneath a pile of receipts and lotion bottles, James found a slim black leather planner. Laura never used paper planners. She hated handwriting things, but this one had scribbles in blue ink, initials, locations, times, GH, 7:30, room 418, Jasper's lunchroom, Pidgey lobby, midnight. He flipped further. A loose receipt fell out. A single wine glass, Hotel Royal, room service. James sat back against the bed frame. She had left a trail, not one mistake, but a whole timeline of secrets, organized, planned. He flipped again, and his heart nearly stopped. A note, torn out and folded 3 times, in Laura's handwriting. If he ever finds out, tell him it was only physical. Keep emotions out, no details. He'll crack if he knows it started years ago. His breath caught. Years? He had been living in a lie not for weeks, not months, but years, and now he was holding written proof that Laura had been preparing for this moment, planning how to handle him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Laura. Miss you already. Hope you're resting today. Call me later. James didn't respond. He stared at the planner in his hands, at the page that had nearly slipped past him. It had a name, not initials, a full name. Greg Harrison. That was her ex, the man she dated before James, the one she said broke her heart, the one she swore she never talked to again. James didn't know whether to scream, cry, or laugh. All he knew was nothing about his marriage was real anymore, and now the game had changed. What else is Laura hiding? What's her endgame? The deeper James digs, the more dangerous the truth becomes. Stay tuned for what's coming next. The moment James tracks down Greg, everything turns upside down. Coming up, when he meets the other man and finds out something she never wanted him to know. Chapter 3. When James meets the other man, he learns the truth was worse than he thought. James couldn't sleep, not after what he read. He had Greg Harrison's name, and that was enough to start digging. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. Not yet, but deep inside, something told him. Laura never really let Greg go. That morning, while Laura texted him about missing his smile, James sat in the parking lot outside Harrison Law Firm. Greg had made something of himself. A senior partner now, his name printed in bold on a polished glass door. James sat in his car rehearsing what he'd say. But when the moment came, his mouth was dry and his hands wouldn't stop twitching. He didn't ask to speak to Greg as a client. He didn't ask at all. He walked in like a man with nothing left to lose. The receptionist barely looked up. Mr. Harrison's busy right now. James leaned in calmly. Tell him it's about Laura. He'll want to hear this. That did it. 5 minutes later, Greg stood in the doorway, stiff and unreadable. He looked older than James remembered from Facebook. More tired, more distant, but the moment their eyes met, James saw it. Recognition, guilt, something flashed in Greg's eyes, then vanished. They sat in Greg's office. Thick carpet, floor-to-ceiling windows, silence between them like a loaded gun. I know, James said simply. Greg didn't play dumb. He exhaled slowly and looked away. How long? James asked. Greg didn't answer right away. Finally. 3 years off and on. The room tilted. James gripped the chair like he might float away. She told me you were gone, Greg added. She said you were distant, that you didn't love her anymore, that you stopped noticing her. James clenched his jaw. Did you love her? Greg looked at him. No. It was sharp, too sharp. He continued, but I needed her attention. I was going through a divorce. She was familiar, safe. James couldn't believe what he was hearing. She was his wife, and Greg used her like a security blanket. "I ended it a year ago," Greg said, but something about the way he said it made James pause. "You ended it?" "But she didn't." Greg looked uncomfortable. "She kept calling, showing up at my place. I blocked her number. I swear." James's stomach twisted. Everything was backward. Laura was the one who couldn't let go. And then Greg pulled something out of his desk drawer. A crumpled envelope. "I didn't want to keep this," he said, "but she mailed it to me 2 weeks ago. I didn't even open it." He handed it to James. The handwriting was unmistakably Laura's. Inside was a photo of her and Greg from that Phoenix Grand mural and a note. "It was always you. I just got scared." James felt the world collapse again. He hadn't lost his wife to another man. He lost her to the memory of one, a version of Greg that no longer existed, a fantasy she had clung to while building a life with James. He stood. Greg didn't try to stop him. "I never meant for it to go this far," Greg said quietly. James turned to him one last time. It already did. As James stepped out into the sunlight, one thing was clear. Laura was lying to both of them, and now she wasn't just hiding an affair. She was hiding an obsession, and James was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to keep it alive. What else has Laura been keeping from him? And how deep does this rabbit hole go? You won't believe what James discovers next. And who else has been helping her hide it? Keep listening, because in the next chapter, everything he thought he knew about his marriage shatters completely. Chapter 4, The Hidden Room and a Message That Shouldn't Exist. James didn't go home after meeting Greg. He couldn't. His hands were still trembling when he pulled into the grocery store parking lot, pretending to shop, just to give himself space to breathe, but no amount of fresh air could make the photo leave his head. "It was always you. I just got scared." He had to confront Laura, but not empty-handed. If she was capable of sending love letters behind his back, who knew what else she was hiding? When he finally entered the house, Laura was on the couch, headphones in, laptop open, watching a documentary like nothing had happened. She smiled at him, eyes bright. "Hey babe, you okay? You look pale." James forced a nod. "Just tired, long day." He kissed her on the forehead. Something about the motion felt like betrayal, but he wasn't ready to let her see his anger yet. He needed her to feel safe, to stay unsuspecting. That night, as she drifted off to sleep beside him, James got up and walked into the garage. There was one place Laura never let him clean. The old utility closet in the corner. She always said it was where she stored her craft supplies. But every time he offered to organize it, she snapped. Now he understood why. With shaking fingers, James opened the door. Boxes of yarn and glue sticks were stuffed up front like a disguise. But behind them was something else. A black lockbox, taped shut. James ripped the tape off. Inside were letters, dozens, all addressed to Greg. Some dated back 5 years, the first year of their marriage. In one, she wrote, "I thought marrying him would erase you. I was wrong." James's throat tightened. He kept reading. Another letter, dated just 2 months ago, said, "Sometimes, when James holds me, I close my eyes and pretend it's you." He dropped the paper. Something inside him cracked. He had lost Laura long before he ever knew it. And then, tucked at the bottom of the box, was something else, a USB drive. It had no label. James hesitated, then walked back inside, plugged it into his laptop, and opened the only file. It was a voice memo. Laura's voice. Soft, intimate whispers meant for someone else. "I still dream of you. I still want you. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." James froze. The timestamp? Yesterday. She had recorded it after they had dinner together, after she kissed him goodnight. And that's when he noticed. The background noise in the recording wasn't their house. It was the echo of a hallway, a hotel hallway. He recognized the chime of the elevator, the low hum of ambient jazz, like the kind they always played at the Blue Fern Hotel downtown. Laura hadn't just been fantasizing. She was planning something, and now James wasn't just betrayed. He was being replaced in real time. But by whom? Greg said it was over. So if it wasn't Greg, who had she been waiting for in that hallway? And why did she sound so sure they'd come? Everything James thought he knew just shifted again. But who's the real man in the shadows? What if Greg was just the beginning? And what if Laura's secrets go even deeper? Stay with this story, because in the next chapter, James discovers someone else knew about the affair the entire time, and they've been watching. Don't miss what comes next. Everything is about to explode. In the next chapter, Chapter 5, The Man in the Hotel Mirror. James didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Laura's whisper in his head, "You know where to find me." Those words spun like blades. He had to know if she meant Greg, or if there was someone else entirely. At 6 a.m., before the sun rose, James drove to the Blue Fern Hotel. He wore a baseball cap low, hoodie zipped up, and parked across the street. He wasn't sure what he was even looking for, just a sense of truth, or maybe the chance to catch her again. He walked in like a guest, smiled at the concierge, and casually glanced at the room registry screen behind the counter, only for a second, but it was enough. Room 908, booked under a corporate name, Eastfield Consulting. He knew that company. Greg didn't work there, but someone else did. Someone James never wanted to see in this context. Chris Hammond, Laura's former boss. The man she always said gave her weird vibes. James's jaw tightened. 3 years ago, Laura left that job saying she wanted something more flexible. Now it looked like Chris had stayed in her life, and maybe never left. James took the elevator to the 9th floor. He didn't knock. He didn't want to confront them. Not yet. He needed something stronger. He needed proof. The hallway was silent, but the air buzzed. At room 908, James crouched down and placed his phone flat against the base of the door. He tapped record. Footsteps. Voices. Then laughter. Laura's laugh. And then Chris's voice. "You kept your promise? I knew you would." A pause. "He still doesn't know?" Then Laura again. "He suspects Greg. But you? Never." James flinched. His heart broke a little differently this time. Not with fire, but with ice. A calm kind of devastation. The kind that doesn't scream. It listens. It memorizes. James stood up and walked away quietly, but not before turning back one last time. The room across the hall had a mirror on the door. In the reflection, he saw movement inside room 908. Laura's silhouette, and then hers turned to face the mirror, and James could have sworn she looked right at him. She didn't react, but for a second, he felt like she knew he was there, and maybe she wanted it that way, as if this wasn't a secret anymore, as if it was a game, and James was no longer just the victim. He was the pawn, but not for long, because the next move would be his. How long has Laura been playing both sides? And why bring Chris back now, unless there's something even more twisted beneath it all? You think you know where this is going? You don't. Because in the next chapter, James discovers a truth buried in his own past, and it changes everything. In the next chapter, Chapter 6, The Secret Behind the Wedding Photo. The house was quiet again, but James's mind was not. He had returned from the hotel with 1,000 thoughts slamming into each other, none making sense, all of them loud. He went straight to the study, sat at his desk and opened the bottom drawer, the one Laura never touched. Inside was a dusty photo album they hadn't looked at in years. It was their wedding album, the one Laura insisted they hide after the 2nd year of marriage because, as she said, it just hurts to look back sometimes. But now James knew that was a lie. He flipped through the pages until he reached a photo he hadn't thought about in forever. Their group photo. The bridesmaids. The groomsmen. Everyone was smiling, except one, Chris. He stood 3 people to the right wearing sunglasses, not smiling, just watching Laura. James zoomed in on the printed photo with his phone. Chris's hand was behind Laura's back. Too close, too familiar. James's throat went dry. Had it started that early? Had this been going on since the beginning? Suddenly, James remembered something he'd forgotten for years. The night before their wedding, Laura disappeared for 4 hours. She said she was at the spa with her sister, but her sister, when asked back then, said they only met for lunch. James dismissed it at the time, brushed it off as wedding nerves. Now it felt like something far more sinister. His pulse raced. He grabbed his laptop and opened an old folder of documents. Emails, receipts, anything saved during the wedding planning, and there it was, a receipt from the Blue Fern Hotel, Dated the night before the wedding. Room 301. Booked under Chris Hammond. James's hands trembled. He hadn't just been cheated recently. He had been living a lie from day one. The affair with Chris didn't begin last month. It was never an affair. It was a shadow, cast from the start. Hidden behind fake smiles and champagne toasts, James leaned back in his chair, breathing heavy. His entire marriage had been built on betrayal, and Laura had played the perfect role, until now. But if she was willing to lie about this, what else had she buried? What other secrets were tucked between the pages of their perfect life? James looked down at his wedding ring, slid it off, stared at the indentation it left behind, and just as he placed it on the desk, a new notification popped up on his phone. A text from an unknown number. It read, "You don't know half of it. Meet me, 11 p.m., Pier 7. No name, no context, but something in his gut told him this wasn't a prank. Someone else knew. Someone had been watching, and maybe, just maybe, they were about to blow everything wide open. Everything James thought he knew about Laura is collapsing fast. But who sent the message? And why now? In the next chapter, James meets a stranger who claims to know the truth behind Laura's double life. And what they say changes everything. Coming up next. Chapter 7, The Stranger at Pier 7. The wind howled as James approached Pier 7. The old wooden planks creaking beneath his shoes. It was late, almost midnight, and the entire waterfront was blanketed in mist, making the distant ships look like shadows in a dream. He clutched his phone tightly, the mysterious message still on the screen. "You don't know half of it. Meet me, 11 p.m., Pier 7. No name, no follow-up, but James couldn't ignore it. He needed answers, real ones. A silhouette emerged from the fog. A man, tall and lean, wearing a gray coat and a black cap pulled low. He stood perfectly still, as if waiting for James to speak first. "You sent the message?" James asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man nodded. "You're Laura's husband, ex-husband," James corrected bitterly. "Not officially." The stranger's voice was deep, calm, too calm. James took a step closer. "Who are you?" The man hesitated, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A flash drive. He held it out. "You need to see what's on this." James didn't move. "Why should I trust you?" The man looked up, just enough for the streetlight to catch his face. James's stomach flipped. He had seen him before, at the wedding, in the crowd, barely noticeable. "Name's Ethan," the man said. "I was Laura's coworker, until I wasn't." James narrowed his eyes. "You're not Chris." "No," Ethan said with a cold smirk. "But I know what Chris doesn't even know." That made James stop. "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "Laura isn't just cheating on you with Chris." He paused. "She's been using him, just like she used me." James's breath caught in his chest. "What are you talking about?" Ethan stepped back, eyes scanning the shadows. "She's not who you think she is. None of this is about love. It's about money." James blinked. "What money?" Ethan handed him the flash drive. "There's a bank account, offshore, hidden in your name." "My name?" James asked, startled. Ethan nodded. "She funneled nearly 200 grand through it, using your identity. She's been preparing to vanish, with Chris as her alibi and you as the scapegoat." James staggered back like he'd been punched. Every breath felt heavier now. That's insane. But a part of him knew it wasn't. Ethan continued. "I worked in IT. I helped her set it up. She promised we'd run away together. Said she was being abused. Said you were dangerous." James felt dizzy. He had been framed, painted as the villain while she stole everything from him. And now he realized the affair was the least of her betrayals. The real story was much deeper, much darker, and he had only just scratched the surface. As James took the flash drive in shaking hands, Ethan said one final thing. "Don't go to the police yet." "Why?" "Because tomorrow, something's going to happen." James's eyes locked with his. "What?" Ethan took a step back into the fog. "You'll know when it does." Then he disappeared, vanished into the mist like he was never there, and James was left standing alone. Flash drive clenched tight, heart thudding with one terrifying question. What is Laura planning tomorrow? And how much time do I have left to stop her? The rabbit hole just got deeper than James ever imagined. A hidden bank account. A fake narrative. A scheme years in the making. But what exactly is Laura planning? And who else is involved? Stick around for the next chapter, where James finally unlocks the truth hidden in the flash drive. And it's worse than he could have ever imagined. Don't miss what happens next. Chapter 8. What was hidden in the drive? James locked the door behind him as soon as he got home. The city outside was still buzzing, but his apartment felt like a war bunker. Quiet, tense, thick with questions. He turned on only one lamp, sat at his desk, and slid the flash drive into the side of his laptop. The screen blinked once. Then a folder appeared. It was titled, The Truth. His fingers hovered over the trackpad. His heart beat like a warning siren. He clicked. Inside were 3 subfolders. One labeled, Financials. Another, Messages. And the third simply titled, Video. He opened the financials first. It was all there: documents, statements, offshore transfers. Over $230,000 moved through an account under his name. Most of it routed through fake companies that didn't exist on paper but matched addresses Laura had access to from her old job. And the kicker? The final transfer, just a week ago, went to a private security firm, one that specialized in identity erasure. James's blood turned to ice. She wasn't just planning to leave him, she was planning to vanish. He closed the folder and opened the one marked Messages. There were screenshots, hundreds, private chats between Laura and Chris, between Laura and a third man, someone named Vincent. This wasn't just one affair. Laura had layers. She'd been playing multiple men for months. In one message, she wrote, "James is just a tool. He doesn't even know his name is tied to the account. Once this clears, I'm gone. Chris thinks he's coming with me, but he's even dumber than James." James leaned back in his chair, nausea creeping up. His ears were ringing. It felt like the walls were caving in. But it wasn't over. He clicked on the video folder. There were 2 clips. He opened the longer one. The video was grainy, clearly recorded from a hidden camera. It showed Laura, standing in what looked like someone's living room. She was pacing, holding a drink, and laughing. Then Chris entered the frame. They kissed. She said, "You don't have to worry about James anymore after Friday. He'll be too busy defending himself in court to bother us." Chris frowned. "Are you sure framing him is the only way?" Laura laughed again. "It's the cleanest way. He already looks suspicious. He has no idea what's coming." James hit pause. His hands were shaking. He replayed that sentence in his head. He has no idea what's coming. What was coming? Friday was tomorrow. He had less than 24 hours. And then he opened the second video. Shorter, different room. And this time, Laura wasn't talking to Chris. She was talking to Vincent. And what she said made James feel like the floor had disappeared under him. "Once James is out of the picture, you'll get the second transfer. But remember, we can't leave any loose ends. Not Chris, not Ethan, especially not James." Vincent nodded. "I'll handle it." And just like that, the video cut. James sat frozen. Murder. She was planning to eliminate them all. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a full-blown setup for something catastrophic. He was never meant to find that flash drive. Ethan might already be dead. And James realized, if he didn't act now, he might not live to see Friday. She didn't just cheat. She lied, manipulated, and planned his downfall from the start. But can James stop what's coming before it's too late? Or is he already running out of time? The next chapter takes everything to a whole new level. Don't miss what happens when James confronts someone he never thought was involved. And it changes everything. Keep listening. You're not ready for what's coming next. To be continued in the next chapter. Chapter 9, the final piece of the puzzle. James didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Laura's face. Smiling, scheming, lying. It was Thursday morning, one day before she planned to ruin his life. And now, he had something she didn't know he had. The truth. He backed up all the contents from the flash drive onto 2 separate hard drives. One he hid in a wall vent behind the bathroom mirror. The other he took with him. James wasn't ready to go to the police just yet. Not without tying one last loose end. There was one person left in this web of betrayal he hadn't confronted. Vincent. The name had haunted him since the second video. He didn't know much about him, just that Laura had once casually mentioned him as a client she'd worked with through her consulting firm. Now, it was clear he wasn't just a client. He was the cleanup crew. James parked a block away from the building Vincent operated out of, a discreet, unmarked office in the industrial side of town. He waited in the car for nearly an hour, watching the front entrance through a cracked window. Then, just before noon, a tall man in a gray coat and sunglasses walked out. It was him. James recognized his face from the video, but something else clicked. Vincent looked familiar. James's heart skipped. He squinted harder, and then it hit him. He had seen Vincent before, not just in Laura's life, but in his. For years ago, James had filed a harassment complaint at his former job. A new contractor had been aggressively pushing for sensitive access. That contractor was Vincent. At the time, nothing came of it. The guy vanished after the complaint, but now he was back. This time tied directly to Laura. James's stomach turned. This had been in motion for years. Had she met Vincent through James? Was that how this all began? He got out of the car and followed Vincent at a distance. He walked fast, like a man who always felt watched. They ended up at a small diner. James slipped into a booth near the back, watching from behind a menu. 15 minutes passed. Then, Laura walked in. She kissed Vincent on the cheek and slid into the booth with him. They weren't lovers. Their body language was sharp, transactional. They were partners. James pulled out his phone and started recording. He couldn't hear them, but he could read enough on their faces. Nods, glances over the shoulder. A black envelope passed from Vincent to Laura. She opened it just enough to reveal a single photo. She smiled, and then mouthed the words that made James go cold. "Make sure it looks like an accident." James's entire body tensed. He wasn't guessing anymore. This wasn't just about framing him. They wanted him dead. He left the diner before they noticed him, heart pounding out of his chest. He had no more time, no more moves to play in the shadows. If he didn't expose them now, he might not live to see the next morning. That night, he sent the recordings, screenshots, and documents to 3 people he trusted: his brother, his attorney, and a journalist who owed him a favor. He labeled the file, "If anything happens to me, start here." Then he poured a glass of scotch, sat at his desk, and picked up his phone. He dialed Laura. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, babe," she said, pretending nothing had changed. But James didn't even say hello. Instead, he said 6 words that made her voice go silent. "I know everything. I have proof." The line went dead, and James smiled, but he didn't see the shadow move past the window. Someone was watching him. You won't believe who shows up at James's door in the final chapter, and what they're really here to do. The ending is going to flip everything upside down. Get ready, because what's coming next changes everything. Keep listening, it all ends in the next chapter. Coming up in the final chapter. Chapter 10, The Truth Was Never Hers. James sat frozen in his chair, the phone still in his hand, the dial tone humming in the silence. The message had been delivered. Now all he could do was wait, and hope he hadn't underestimated just how far Laura and Vincent were willing to go. A knock shattered the silence. 3 sharp taps. Slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed. James stood up cautiously. He moved toward the door, every step echoing like thunder through the empty house. He peeked through the peephole. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Laura. It wasn't even Vincent. It was Emily, his sister. But something was wrong. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide with panic, and in her shaking hands, she held the second hard drive, the one James had hidden behind the mirror. He flung the door open. "What are you doing here?" he asked, heart racing. But before she could answer, she pushed past him into the house, slamming the door shut and locking it. "James," she whispered, breathless. "They know. They were in my house." He blinked. "What? Who? What are you talking about?" Emily held up the hard drive. "They were searching for this. They tore the place apart, and they left a note." James took the piece of paper from her trembling fingers. It wasn't a threat. It was coordinates, latitude, longitude, and a single sentence beneath it. "Come alone if you want the truth." James felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that location. It was the warehouse by the river, the one his company had shut down 3 years ago after an internal scandal. He had worked there once, so had Laura. It's where they'd first met, and now it was the place she wanted this to end. "Stay here," James said to Emily, grabbing his coat. "If I don't come back in an hour, send everything to the police." He left without another word. The warehouse was exactly as he remembered. Cold, hollow, haunted by the ghosts of the past. The air smelled of oil and rust. His footsteps echoed as he moved toward the flickering light at the center of the floor. Laura was there, standing in a red coat, arms crossed. Behind her stood Vincent, holding a metal briefcase. "You came," Laura said with a smile. "No cops?" "I'm impressed." James didn't respond. He just stared. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "You already lost. I sent the files. Everyone knows." But Laura didn't flinch. She took a step forward. "James, you think you figured it out, but you never asked yourself the real question." "What question?" Her smile deepened. "Whose idea do you think this all was?" He blinked. Laura turned to Vincent. He opened the case. Inside was a manila folder, and on the front of it, in block letters, was a name that made James stagger back. Emily Morgan, his sister. Laura stepped closer. "She came to me 2 years ago, said she wanted out, said you were controlling, paranoid, emotionally unstable, said she was afraid of what you'd do to her." "That's a lie," James whispered. "She wanted me to ruin you," Laura said. "She planned it, financed it. She just didn't expect you to find out so fast." James shook his head. "No. She brought me the drive. She warned me." Laura laughed. "Exactly. She knew you'd trust her. That's why we sent her to you." The entire world spun. Everything James had done to protect himself, he'd played right into her hands. He stepped back, pulse racing, heart broken in half. "Why?" he croaked, and then a voice came from the shadows behind him. "Because you destroyed my life first." He turned. Emily, holding a gun, tears in her eyes. "You never let me be free, James. You always had to be the hero, the one in control. You ruined every chance I had to live for myself. So I ruined yours." James stared at her in silence. 3 lives, 3 lies, 1 bullet. But before she could pull the trigger, a shot rang out. Vincent collapsed. Emily screamed. Laura ran, and James turned to see Detective Ramirez, gun in hand. "I got your email," the detective said. "Guess I got here just in time." James collapsed to the ground, shaking. It was over, but nothing would ever be the same. And as they cuffed Emily and dragged Laura from the shadows, he realized something chilling. The truth hadn't saved him. It had nearly destroyed him. So now the question is, would you rather live in a lie that feels safe, or the truth that leaves you completely alone? Let me know in the comments. And if you think this story was wild, wait until you hear what James finds in his father's will just 2 weeks later.